Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to what is basically going to be the final essay for your various text unit in 12th grade. Now, for our essay in this unit, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're not actually going to write, your typical thematic or kind of summative literary analysis for this particular unit. Instead, what we're going to do is tackle a personal narrative, kind of like a personal memoir, or kind of a psychological narrative if you want, or even something that might actually help you with your college essay process. Now, I don't want it to be, as you're going to see, I don't want it to be simply a college essay. It's actually going to be something a little bit more broad and actually something hopefully a lot more meaningful. So let's actually look at the essay prompt itself. And I'm actually going to edit it in one moment, but let's take a look at the main prompt. It says, write an essay in which you explain why you are here and pursuing the goals which you currently are working towards. Consider organizing the essay in sections describing your past and present life with the most significant moments therein. Then explain what you hope to work towards and why this is a productive, fulfilling, and moral goal. Okay. So in essence, we're writing essentially an essay about what is the purpose of your life, or what is a good goal for you to pursue in your life, given who you are and where you are now. Now, I'm going to actually edit it real quick. It says write an essay. It doesn't give you a standard of like a word count or all that kind of stuff. It should be an essay, let's see, from, I'm going to say 750 to 1,000 words. Whoop. Essay, let's say, there we go, in which you explain all these things. So that's the general range. Now, let's talk about that for a minute. We are not asking you to write an essay about, why you want to go to college necessarily, or why you need to earn this much money, or you want to make it into this career path or something like that. It's actually got to be a little bit deeper, as you'll see in 1 minute. Now, if you actually take this essay as seriously as I would hope some students would at a healthy level, it hopefully will be very psychologically, spiritually, if you want to call it that, beneficial to you. It will actually get you at least thinking about your life at a very different level than we're probably used to in a simple high school setting. So why do I put this particular essay at the end of the various text unit and at the beginning of the 12th grade, like first 12th grade assessment, essentially? Well, basically, because if we look back at the literature we were just looking at, we looked at religious texts, we looked at mythic texts, we looked at the texts of the 20th century and discussed, the stuff therein. And then we even discussed the kind of ideas and themes coming out of a really difficult work like A Good Man is Hard to Find. And there was a consistent theme through, or a couple of consistent themes through all of those different pieces of literature, basically regarding how we are to conduct ourselves properly in this world, how we are to behave properly in this world. And I want to use that as a foundation to then talk about what your goals should be in your life. Now, before we get there, or before we really jump into the whole past narrative and the whole present narrative and all this kind of stuff, I want to have a really quick discussion about that specifically, about how you are to characterize or how you are to articulate the purpose of life. If you're following me closely and you remember our introduction video for 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade English, you'll notice that I explicitly in there explain what I believe is essentially the most important teaching for us to convey to students ever. And if not, also the purpose of life. And it is basically what corresponds with Viktor Frankl's purpose of life. It's also what corresponds with essentially every really major philosopher's purpose of life, and definitely every major world religion's purpose of life. And that is phrased a number of different ways, but it basically boils down to the fact that we need to be, if not be, then actually become good or better and more moral people. We need to transfigure ourselves into more moral people. We need to increase our moral health, essentially. We need to be good people. Now, again, that can be phrased a lot of different ways, particularly if you are a religious person. That's going to sound a little bit different. I'm putting it in a very kind of secular way of articulating it, but I'm doing that just to show you how universal that purpose is. Now, guys and gals, starting off the bat, if you disagree with me, which you are, of course, always welcome to do, I am not a completely tyrannical educator, you are totally okay to do that. That's fine. I'm only going to warn you that that might make this whole aspect of the paper a little bit difficult, because the paper is going to ask you to explain why your purposes and goals in your life are moral, fundamentally, okay? And it's going to be really challenging, I think, for us to come up with a more moral purpose than simply growing our own virtues, becoming better people at a moral dimension, okay, fundamentally. So if you agree with me, if you agree with, all the wisdom of the past, that is essentially the purpose of life, that we need to become really, really good people, essentially, then we can move forward a little bit, all right? And if we move forward now, we can kind of consider, well, how do we define that? And why should we actually accept that premise at any real level of certainty? So, or real level of, what do you want to call it, of affirmation. So take a look right here. This is going to be a really quick organizer that we did in class one day about just some notes of discussion about this particular essay. Now, you can see here that we have like a little bubble for the past, and then the present, and then the future, as we're going to organize this essay in a minute. Before we get there, though, I want to talk about these sort of things over here, where we are discussing the whole moral dimension of this paper. And when we usually ask students, what are your goals? What is the purpose of your life? All this sort of stuff. We run into generally three categories of students here. We have students who, at some level, have never really thought about that. And they're basically, to put it in a not so kind way, they're basically living for the weekend. They're basically living to just get whatever enjoyment that they can out of life, that to try to keep whatever suffering, whatever challenges they have at bay, and just, have some general contentment with the world. That is one way to live. Okay, that is fine. Now it's not fine, but as we're going to see, that's normal, and that's typical at this age, especially, and maybe at any age actually. And then there's a second category of student that I usually see that has some pretty concrete goals. However, those concrete goals are missing the moral dimension to them. So, for example, these are the students who will say, I want to, become a very successful business person, or I want to be very successful in my career. I want to earn, over $100,000 a year, all this kind of stuff. And then we'll have, students in that same category who say like, well, if it's not that, then I definitely want, some kind of athletic pursuit. I want some sort of kind of artistic pursuit, all this kind of stuff. That's, again, quite typical. But again, it is missing the moral dimension to some degree. The border between the final group of students and this present one that we're talking about are people who at least will say that I want to have a family. I want to have some relationship goal in my life, that's kind of where their attention is. And that's where we jump into this last category of students who will explicitly say that, but will add the moral dimension to it and say, I want to become a better person so that I am a good what? A good father, a good mother, a good son, a good daughter, a good, husband, wife, all this kind of stuff. Like you're seeking to become something better than what you are now, okay? That's really usually the third category. It's usually a minority, but that's fine. So what I want to do is try to at least get us to think in that direction a little bit more. Now, why, by the way, why? Let me justify myself to you. Well, here's the basic premise that I think most of the thinkers and the literary sources who agree with me on the purpose of life will basically point out these things right here, these two fundamental points. One I have tried to illustrate with this kind of goofy little graph here. And it describes on a very practical, technical level, what happens to all these different healths, all these different types of health or these different goals that we have as we age through life. So as we could start with, let's do a very popular one, which is money, okay? Financial health. Your financial health will generally, ideally, increase over time. Okay, so as you pass the age of 20 into 30 into 40, you're going to start making quite a bit of money, and it might kind of plateau quite a bit. But if you're a really successful business person, or you've made some really good financial investments, whatever the case is, hopefully it will actually really increase over time and just exponentially. Now, why does that particular piece of health drop to zero at the end? Well, or drop to kind of nil at the end? Well, because what usually cuts our finances short? Well, death, fundamentally. In death, or at least on your deathbed, let's actually use that as the example, right? Because I'm trying to like not say it's death right here, but it's at the point of death. At the point of death, your finances effectively are useless and effectively are not something that you are concerned about. If you are in fact in doubt of that, I mean, talk to your family, talk to anybody who's been around someone, or at least has been on their deathbed. Finances are not in the major front of their concern if they're a completely healthy and moral person. I would say that. Okay. How about your physical health? Well, the physical health, as you can see, this brown line, yeah, fundamentally will increase to a plateau and a peak, but it will start to depreciate over time. Okay, you will start to, you could maintain it if you're, really, physically active and all this kind of good stuff. But then it will, reach a point where your body fundamentally will fail and you will die. Okay, so deathbed, you have no fundamental physical health. Okay. How about your career? Well, the exact same thing happens with the finances one. Again, hopefully your career is stable, is increasing. It gets better and better over time. Maybe it plateaus, maybe it just keeps going up, again, depending on how savvy or a kind of person you are. And then what will happen is you will be placed on that deathbed again. Okay. Now, how about your mental health? Well, again, I think mental health is something it's really kind of fraught here, as the graph is trying to explain, is that, it's going to go up and down and maybe reach peaks at kind of your middle age or kind of your later age. Sure. But it will start to depreciate as well over time. In what way? Well, if it's cognitive decline as you get older, sure. If it's kind of just the general, slowness of your mind as you get older and older, sure. If it's not outright dementia or Alzheimer's or something like this, sure. But it's a rare person that's going to have all of their cognitive faculties with them in ship shape the day before they die. Okay, that's pretty rare, generally, if they're dying of kind of just general age and all this kind of stuff. Now, what about relationship health? What about, and then what undergirds that, which is the health of your character? Okay, well, in theory, if you maintain, that is, or let's put it this way, that is in theory the one dimension of health that you could continuously make increase even to the point when you're on your deathbed. If not, depending on what you believe, depending on your worldview, if not even after you die. Okay, so real talk, essentially is what this is. What fundamentally matters in life? Well, is it that much of a logical leap to say what matters in life are the things that will endure the longest? Okay, and if you are, someone who is skeptical about, human existence and human life after death and all this kind of stuff, then fair enough. You can say, well, at our deathbed, what's really going to be important. And I think it's pretty clear at our deathbed what's important is, number one, the legacy that you leave behind with your relationships. I think fundamentally that's what it is. People will usually say it's the legacy of what I've built, but of course, I think that's undercut by relationships, because if people hate you when you die, everything you've built is not going to last. Whereas if people really do love you fundamentally when you die, things that you have built or things you have left behind in whatever form will consist and kind of have a higher likelihood of consisting and continuing. Okay. So sure, if we're secular, if we're skeptical about life after death and all this kind of stuff, whereas if you adopt the kind of religious worldview, if you're, believe that we do kind of persist, our consciousness or our existence does persist after death and this kind of stuff, well, then I think it's pretty clear that obviously the thing that matters the most is your relationships and your own personal moral health. Okay. that's pretty obvious because that one will consist, after death. Your wealth, your career, all this other kind of stuff, it's not going to last. So that, in some sense, again, irrelevant of your worldview, should put things in perspective, or should kind of be a pretty logical and obvious point of organization for your priorities. Now, the last little graphic that I have here for you is this little thing right here, this kind of inverse pyramid. And it's basically trying to illustrate why I keep saying that goodness really underlines all of these goals. Because if we step back for a minute and we say, okay, fine, if you agree with what I'm saying, if you agree with the general consensus of human wisdom that says, hey, relationships are where we are going to find the most fulfillment in life, in being fundamentally a good person, in being a good, romantic partner, in being a good father, in being a good, son, daughter, family member, brother, whatever. What undergirds that, or what makes that possible, is your own virtue, your own personal goodness, okay? Without that, you will inherently not be able to sustain any of the other goals in your life, okay? Which I think, again, should be pretty intuitively obvious, but this little graphic sort of might help you visualize that. So if you focus on, or if you at least attend to, at a serious level, your own moral goodness, and we'll talk about how to do that in a second, and then we'll move on to the essay. If you do this, well, then it's hard to see how your own mental and physical health actually will not maintain itself to some degree as well. Okay. Now, of course, they're not, necessarily connected. You can have really, really big challenges with your mental health, really huge challenges with your physical health, and still be an incredibly moral person. Just makes it harder. Okay. But if you really are a well-rounded and good and virtuous person, whatever that means, as we'll get there, then it will kind of generally incline you towards behaviors that are more healthy. Okay. You're not going to be going out and getting drunk kind of constantly and indulging in every sort of drug that you could possibly imagine and eating yourself into a stupefaction and, sleeping around with everybody. You're probably not going to be doing that stuff if you're really concerned with general moral goodness. Okay. So sure, you're going to be able to maintain that. If you are, in fact, a good and moral person and taking care of yourself, do you really think that you're not going to be a successful, or at least a more successful and more desirable romantic partner to somebody? I would guarantee pretty much every girl listening to this, every boy listening to this would say that they probably prefer fundamentally a romantic partner who is a good person, as opposed to someone who just is hot, right? It's probably what you want more out of the person. So that's going to be able to succeed. And thus your family life, your growth of relationships with your children, your growth of relationships with your parents, all of that, in theory, should be at least stable, as long as the other party, of course, is not, toxic and dysfunctional. Then that should probably be something that's pretty obviously maintainable. But again, on the firm foundation of this goodness. And then same thing goes for friends. And fundamentally, guys, the same thing will go with every other pursuit, be it career, be it art, be it sports, whatever you want, whatever projects you then will pursue in life. They should be on pretty firm ground if you establish your moral character. If you do not, none of this will be as stable as it could have been. Okay. So the fundamental stabilizing factor in your life, and therefore I think the fundamental purpose in most of our lives, the underlining purpose of all of our lives, is to make sure we are maintaining our moral goodness. Okay. That's pretty clear. Now, again, some people, you look back at my video and say, well, wait a minute, I thought the purpose of life was to love. Well, yes, it is. But there is little distinction between loving someone properly and being a good person, right? If you are fundamentally not a good person, you're going to be almost incapable of loving people properly. Okay. So they go hand in hand. They're kind of, this is why I say, the purpose of life answers are kind of like they meld and mesh and kind of form together, where there really is no difference between the two of them, or the three of them, or the four of them, all this kind of stuff. Okay. Now, what do we actually mean by goodness? What are some just general good indicators of someone's moral goodness that we should move forward into this essay, kind of thinking in our head? And again, these are not original to me. These are original to virtually every moral teacher throughout the ages for 5,000 plus years. These are consistent with virtually every world religion, every good world, every major world philosophy, so on and so forth. So let's take a look. Fundamentally, I would say one of the most important ones is you need to be truthful and therefore humble, okay? Truth and honesty. You need to not lie to yourself. You need to not pretend rather, as if you are more or less than what you are. You need to practice consistent honesty, not only fundamentally with yourself, but also with others, okay? You cannot lie. You must not deceive yourself. You must not completely detach yourself from what truly is in the world. If you do that, you know, you're really on shaky ground for the rest of figuring out what the rest of reality and life is all about. So this is one of the reasons why, you know, my father and a lot of the teachers that I love very much are so adamant about truth. Okay, you must tell the truth. You must be honest, even if it's little things. Okay, that doesn't mean you need to go share every little thing with everybody, but it at least means that you should just not lie if you are asked about something. Okay, and asking yourself about something. So that's one really good marker of a good person. The other one, of course, is actively helping others, actively showing charity to those around you, actively, therefore, loving those around you, okay? That's just the classic incitement to love. You must love someone. Now, people will debate as to like, well, how do you do that? What does true love look like? Is it just being kind and gentle to people, or is it kind of, you know, a little tough love, like forcing people to kind of seek the greatest good for themselves, seek the greatest growth in themselves? It's a little bit of both, right? It's a little bit of both. We have to kind of make those distinctions, which jumps over to this one right here, which we're skipping over a little bit. But this point right here, understanding right and wrong, having the ability to kind of discern what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what would be better for someone, what would not be better for someone, based on the goal of growing that person's moral goodness. So for example, you know, like if I have a child and that child is like, you know, really, really doesn't want to go to school or really doesn't want to do this or this or that, and I know that they can do it and I know that they should do it because that is going to make them a stronger and more competent and maybe even a braver and a more moral and more kind of wise person, I have to do that to them, even though that they are going to have some momentary or at least short-term discomfort in doing it. Okay. So general wisdom, right? Someone who understands right and wrong, good and evil. Facing fears. You need to have courage. You need to have the fortitude to do what is right, okay? Even if other people will not like it. You need to have the courage to tell the truth, even if other people will fire you for it, even if other people will end a relationship for it. You need to tell the truth, because if anything is founded on lies or founded on, you know, some kind of act of cowardice, some kind of unaddressed issue or unaddressed wrong, then it's going to crumble. It's doomed to fail from the start. Okay, so have the courage, have the fortitude to face your fears, whatever it is that you are afraid of, whatever it is that's holding you back from reaching your full potential to be a good and strong person. That needs to be confronted. You fundamentally also need to be kind to everyone. Every single human being deserves kindness, deserves some love, some respect at some fundamental level, right? That's a pretty consistent theme that we saw, especially in the literature that we just read. Absolutely. And then finally, I would say deeper kind of underneath all of this is the desire to actually choose to improve and change yourself. You must desire that. You have to want to change. You have to want to become a better person. And going back to those three categories of students, there may be some people in those three categories who say no to this, who say, no, I will actively, maybe not, they won't consciously do this, but they will, at some unspoken psychological level, internal level, they will say, I choose not to improve. I choose not to change. I just want to keep going with how I am. I just want to kind of sit in my own kind of comfort right now. I'm not going to really try to improve all that much. If that is your choice, that is your choice. But know that you are essentially betraying the fundamental purpose of life. You are not following the true purpose of your life, which is to step out of that comfort, step out of that, you know, possibly completely dysfunctional way that you're living and become a better person. Okay. So that's generally how we want to kind of understand the underlying point of this essay, which is how to be good. Now, some of you might be saying, well, wait a minute, does that mean that like all these essays are going to look the same? And does that mean that we're all going to be writing the same thing, which is I'm going to be moral and I'm going to be a good person? Here's blah, blah, blah. No, it does not, because it is an essay, as you can see here, that's asking you to specifically talk about how you and your specific goals will be moral, okay, or that you will enact them morally based on who you are and based on where you are coming from, okay? Now, how do we determine that? How do we understand those aspects, right? The past and the present aspects of our lives. Well, I've given students this personal narrative organizer, and it's organized very bluntly into, past, present, and future goals, sections and categories. Now, I tell students fundamentally that I want them to spend the majority of their time probably on the past. I want them to basically just vomit up, just kind of like throw everything that they can appropriately down onto the past section in whatever form you want. If you want to have it actually written out like prose, do it. If you want to have it bullet points, do it, whatever. You need to here identify the most meaningful or impactful events or times in your past, both positive and negative, okay? And then you might want to consider organizing them into certain periods. So go through like earliest memories, what were they? Happiest memories, what were they? Worst memories, what were they? Relationships, how are they? How is your relationship with mom and dad? How is your relationship with friends, siblings, any boyfriends or girlfriends, anything like this? What sort of little achievements did you get in the past? What sort of failures did you get in the past? What did you enjoy doing in the past? What did you not enjoy doing? And then see what that reveals about who you are, essentially. That's what we kind of need to do here. And I've had students write everywhere from like barely this much, like this much space, to 10 pages worth of information, okay? I really encourage you to put more down on here, as much as you possibly can, because the more you put into this, as usual, the more you will get out. Okay, how do we then work with the present stuff? Here is where, in a rare moment, I will usually encourage students to utilize something like ChatGPT, or any AI program, because they're actually quite helpful with something like this. I want you here to summarize, as it says here, where you are now as you are growing through life. Okay, so it's like we've looked at all the past, we got all this kind of history behind us, we got all this stuff, and it's like, okay, well then where are we now? Where am I now regarding my past, regarding everybody else? How am I doing generally as a general standard of a human being right now? What are my strengths and weaknesses? Given the past experiences I have, and given where I am and what I'm doing right now, what strengths do I have? So am I, a competent student? Am I a competent social person? Am I good in social interactions? How am I with, my parents? How am I with my friends, my family? Do I have friends and family that I have a good relationship with? How am I with, the dating world? Do I have a boyfriend or girlfriend? All this kind of stuff. What weaknesses do we have? Are we failing in any of those dimensions? Are we failing in our academic pursuits? Are we failing to confront any other issues in our lives? All this kind of stuff, right? Do we have some things that we're struggling with, physically even? Like I told students, right, even physically, like are you struggling with an injury? Are you struggling with trying to improve your physical health? All this kind of stuff. Do you have addictions? Like all this kind of these things that we struggle with. And then right here is a kind of a weird phrase, gifts or blessings and curses. So given all of your past and what you have now, try to contemplate, like, how are you doing generally in life? Do you have blessings that you've been given? Now, what I mean by blessings and gifts are things that we have, as I said, been given, something that we haven't kind of really earned, something that you kind of just grew up having, or you came into this world, you were born into this world with. So for example, were you born just a physical kind of specimen, right? Were you born with physical blessings? Were you born with a higher IQ? Were you born with, I don't know, more attractiveness? Were you born with, I don't know, parents with more money and more opportunities available to you, therefore? All these kind of things. Same thing with curses. Were you born with physical limitations? Were you born with mental limitations? Were you born with any other kind of limitations on you that you had no choice in? That includes also, as students have shared, that includes any sort of family functions and dysfunctions. So it's a blessing if you have really loving, functional parents, and it is a curse if you have parents that are less so, okay? So yeah, explain those to us. How are your relationships? Like we said, how is your health? How are your skills? How are your experiences? Okay, so formulate just generally, this is where I am. these are the good things, these are the bad things, these are the things that might need a little bit of work, all this kind of stuff. Okay, moving into the future now. Explain where you should be going now and why. What should you be working towards, and why is this a noble goal? What will you be fighting against or be careful, or what will you what will you have to be fighting against or be careful of along the way? And what is your plan to deal with these issues? Okay, so fundamentally, where are you going to go? Okay, so again, your goal fundamentally is going to be different for every person. Every person is different. Every person has different strengths and weaknesses and blessings and curses. Everyone has a completely different past, and therefore their direction will be different in some regard. However, they must all be undergirded and founded on that idea of goodness, on that idea of a moral pursuit. That's what we're trying to teach you here, that you can pursue all sorts of different roads in life, kind of like we talked about with the Garden of Eden, right? You can pursue all sorts of different things in life as long as you are being moral, okay? As long as you are trying to be good. So where do you see that kind of moral imperative, that moral purpose in life drawing you? Do we need, for example, to just kind of continue on in life and continue growing our moral nature? Do we want to continue learning? Do we want to continue working? Do we want to kind of establish a family? Do we want to kind of improve our relationship goals? All this kind of stuff. And so on and so forth. So it's like, well, if that's the case, then explain to me, well, fine, that's your goal. Why is this noble? Why is this good? If you say career, which you are totally able to do, you must say, yes, I want to embark on, this career path, but I want to be an honest and a kind and a charitable person on this career path so that I can what? Have enough money to number one, improve my own ability to kind of support my family. Maybe that's one of the main reasons that I can maybe give more to charity, that I can just be a general better force for good in the world. Sure. If it's something like, athletics, that's a little bit more challenging. Something like artistic pursuits, that's more challenging. You need to kind of find a way to, which I'm not saying is impossible, by the way. You need to find a way to articulate, well, how are you going to enact some sort of moral dimension in that pursuit, okay? Now, again, whatever the goal is, you also need to tell me, what are you going to be fighting against? What are the kind of limitations or struggles that you're going to have along the way? And if you are, paying attention, probably the biggest struggle you will have is your own nature, right? Remember that from like Lord of the Flies, right? The biggest struggle we have in pursuing goodness and pursuing our purposes in life is our own weaknesses and failures internally. So explain to me, well, what are they, and how will you work against them? How will you try to conquer those things, or at least mitigate them to make your life more successful towards that moral goal, okay? That's essentially what we are doing here. Now, again, this section, the past, should be the biggest one. This present should be pretty quick. And the reason why I mentioned ChatGPT, I didn't explain that, I apologize, is because what I usually encourage students to do is take their past and copy and paste it into ChatGPT and say, hey, this is my personal narrative. So literally go into ChatGPT and type in, would you read my personal narrative, and summarize where my strengths and weaknesses are with relationships, with health, with experience, with skills, all this kind of stuff. And ChatGPT will usually spit out a very nice, organized summary of all that sort of stuff in a kind of more notated version. And do I want you to then take what ChatGPT creates and then plug it in here for a grade? Preferably not, because what do I want you to do? I want you to actually read what it says, because you might actually disagree with some of it. You might agree with a lot of it, or you might agree with only part of it. So I want you to use it as a kind of general tool for feedback and to kind of spur you on to some thoughts and kind of assessments about yourself. So meld what it's telling you and then meld what you are thinking as well into one, and see if you can create some kind of good synthesis to figure out this present stuff. Now, the future goals, again, should be quite short, actually. I don't know why I made it bigger of 3 boxes, but it should be very short. You should be able to tell me, 2 or 3, maybe just one fundamental goal that you are seeking, that you're kind of pursuing here, okay? That's what we're looking for. Now, if you do that, once you do that, you simply need to sit down, and then in a minimum of 750 words, you need to explain to me all of this. Explain where you come from, explain where you are now, and explain where you are going and how your pursuits and your goals will be, yes, productive in life and for the world around you, and will be fulfilling. How will it make you kind of, really experience that meaning of life? And how will it also be good and moral? Okay, how will you maintain, how will you underline all of this with a sense of goodness and a sense of trying to become a better and more moral person? Okay, so if you do that, gold. And it should actually, in theory, make your college essay a lot easier, right? Because then if you get this done, it's like you get a lot of stuff sorted out. So I hope you do this. I hope you put enough time and thought into it to really reflect on your life and reflect on the purpose of life and reflect on the meaning of life, and then start to kind of experience it more and more as you not only write it down, but as you actively live it out, right? Some people will say, oh, I struggle with this because I'm writing this and I'm not really feeling it. I don't really feel this meaning, this purpose, this joy, all this kind of stuff. Well, you got to live it out, guys, right? We got to live it out. And we got to remember that we're only, between the ages of 15 and 18 right now. So, we haven't necessarily experienced all of the fundamental joys of life. Most of the major joys of life we have not experienced. So as you go on and live these things out, you will, if you are doing it properly, if you're doing it morally, and, and trying to and experience all of it, you will experience the really deep and profound joy and meaning in life and in this world, okay? So do this, please, okay? Give it some attention. If you find yourself struggling with it, that's okay. That's normal. And it, at the very least, should be a little bit of a wake-up call to start examining your life a little bit more and start living at a very deeper level, at a more rich level, because it will really make life much, much more worth living, okay? I hope so, and I hope you're able to experience that. So thank you very much, and good luck on the essay, and have a fantastic day in the meantime. Bye.